Hi, I'm Ira Wallace with Southern Exposure Seed Exchange here at Acorn Community Farm, and I'm for the soil because the soil is the basis of our agriculture. Soil grows our plants, and I love good soil.
Welcome once again to For the Soil, a conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee, and we've got a very interesting guest lined up for you today and an interesting topic. Carl Stafford will be joining us for part 2 of our conversation. But first of all, I wanted to remind everyone of a relatively new blog post at our website, forthesoil.org. It's 5 priorities of soil health management, an introduction. Very good introduction to the basic principles of soil health, and you'll find that once again at the website forthesoil.org, and there on the menu bar across the top of the page, just click on blog. Now, an introduction from Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition.
All right, this is Mary Sketch Bryant, the Virginia Soil Health Coalition and Virginia Tech, and we're so excited to have Carl Stafford back with us for a second episode. If you didn't listen to the first episode with Carl, would encourage you to do that. Carl is an agriculture and natural resources extension agent with Culpeper in Culpeper County with Virginia Cooperative Extension, and has a wealth of knowledge specifically around grazing, but around a variety of topics and deeply embedded in the community. So thanks for joining us for another episode, Carl.
My pleasure.
And Carl, to start off, we talked a lot last episode about innovation, the intersections of grazing and soil health. And another intersection that we like to explore a lot with For the Soil is around community well-being and soil health. And I know that you've been very involved from the beginning with the Carver Center, and would love to just hear for our listeners who don't know what the Carver Center is. What is the Carver Center?
So this building was constructed in 1 year in 1947, and it was built to give teenage African-American students a place to go to high school. Some of them found high school by going to Christiansburg in Montgomery County. Some found high school experiences in Northern Virginia. Some didn't get any high school experiences. So the school was built. It was populated by some 600 students, and they were from 4 counties surrounding Culpeper, regionally central spot. And Mark Warner heard the word regional school, and he goes, "What? What's that?" There aren't any regional schools, but during segregation there were. There might be some regional vocational schools today, but there weren't any regional schools. But this one occurred. It was during segregation. So the intent was to provide education, and what I learned from its students was that there were some unintended consequences. So the community was brought together there during events at the school, and so business relationships and relationships, period, were initiated. And just because people are from the same race doesn't mean they know each other, and geographically they're separated, and so they come together at that school, the George Washington Carver Regional High School, and it was an unintended part of the result by having families come together there during school events, and it helped their connections with each other, their business cooperations. So it mattered, and I can't tell you how many ways it mattered, but I heard the students who went there that it really did matter, and it was important to them. So that building is now in its 3rd use. Its second life was as a vocational school. It was named Piedmont Vocational School, and 30 years worth of students. So the first 20 years was during segregation, and segregation ended, and students left in those last couple of years, and teachers left, and people actually lost jobs, and things fell apart for the folks that ran the school somewhat. But vocational use for 30 years, so 50 years worth of students went through that building. And then after the vocational system changed, Germanna Community College did some adult education at night and during the day, and that too came to an end. And then the county Culpeper County acquired ownership from the other 4 counties, other 3 counties, 4 altogether. And then the question was posed, what can we do with this building? And the first answer was, well, I don't know, it's a little ways out there. It's a few miles down 15 from Culpeper, 5 minutes driving time. From 29, there's no difference in driving across town than it is driving down 15 to get to the school. So it now has morphed into an ag service center concept, and Extension will be one of the first occupants. And we have some positive responses from USDA leadership. We'll see how that goes. Their local advisors must be in sync with leadership and decide that it's a good idea. But the service center concept is being discussed and applied. And it's kind of like car dealers at Culpeper. We've got all the dealers out there on 29. And if you're into Fords, you might look at a Nissan or a Chrysler at the same time, compare notes, see if there's a better deal somewhere else. I think that can happen. They're coming into, say, they come into forestry and they ask the Soil and Water Conservation District, or they go to FSA or Extension. And so all those agencies can occupy and serve the citizens that are using land to produce food and fiber in Virginia. And we think there's a lot of potential in the Carver Center serving a regional audience, and food becomes a focal point. So there's a commercial kitchen that's currently under construction. I didn't spend as much time as an extension agent worrying about human nutrition, even though there was human nutrition expertise in the office. But now I'm paying attention to it. Why? Because there's a kitchen. And so the tomato we grow must be the type of processing tomato that works in the kitchen. So it's not a slicing tomato. It's one that, maybe a Roma tomato that is good for sauce. I've used that example a lot. And so it matters now what you grow and how its characteristics are, and whether it will keep under freezing or canning or drying or pickling or whatever it may be. So now it matters to me what's going on in that kitchen, because it reflects back what's going on out on the land too. A business intent with that kitchen, so entrepreneurs can come in there in a safe place, inspected, high volume. They can try out recipes, scale up, try out a new method, make 50 gallons of chili, for example. It's under inspected conditions. It can then be served to the public. Rutans or whoever could do that. But entrepreneurs are busy with their food businesses, and we want to support that and nurture it. And then we expect them to graduate out and go on their own. So we'll see how that goes. There are examples. DC Union Kitchen is one of the examples, and Becky Gartner deserves credit for finding that spot and looking at it and talking to its participants and its leadership and its management. So some of that can be applied at the Carver Center. But food's coming together there, and the benefit to agriculture overall, and people learning by doing and watching other examples.
And Carl, I think we talk about soil, as basic infrastructure, and I think also trying to encourage people to think about the systems and how everything's interacting. And really sounds like there's a network of different individuals as well as organizations working there. I know you've worked closely with Virginia State University Small Farm Outreach Program, as well as the minority veteran farmers of the Piedmont. If you talk a little bit more about that collaboration and how there really is a network of people and the idea of sort of energizing with diversity to make a system work.
I think VSU's done as much to put us on the map as about any other action at the Carver Center. They have brought people and resources and learning by doing and workshops and experiential learning that is so key to gaining an understanding of and ability to apply. And so they have Virginia State's Small Farm Outreach Program has basically agreed with minority and veteran farmers of Piedmont to be essentially a representative of in the local community of that Small Farm Outreach Program, and to follow the procedures and the processes and the training methods that can be delivered through Extension and through the Virginia State program, and are occurring across Virginia, all the way into Southwest Virginia and all over. So the spread of that program is significant and appealing to me to see it grow and reach more and more people. And again, to reach more and more people that are examples of farmers that look like the students, and they can see themselves in those examples and say, well, this is something I can do because they're doing it, and I think I'll give it a try. So there's a lot of efforts in Virginia to be on the land and to maybe revisit roots. We all have roots back to agriculture if you go 2-3 generations back, and there's a lot of aspiration to return to that and do what family members did on land where they did it. The Carters in Louisa and Orange County are a good example. We're talking several generations, and the next generation's down there making the most of it. And Michael Carter Sr. is just tickled to death to have a farmer in the family. And his son, Michael Carter Jr., is that farmer, and he's speaking and he's applying and he's doing things. And so there's an example of what others can follow. But so a dynamic group and a diverse group and an active group, and things are happening, and examples are being demonstrated. Food becomes the focal point.
Carl, maybe a slight aside, but just to step back to the origins, for our listeners who don't know who George Washington Carver is, it just seems so fitting, especially now that the center really has its roots in food, that it's named after him. Could you share a little bit about that legacy?
Yeah, and I have my things. I had my things around me, but they're all in boxes now. We're moving to the Carver Center within a week or 10 days. So I would reach out and I'd pick up things that have the gentleman's image on them. We actually requested that the Smithsonian give us permission to use a painting of George Washington Carver as part of our marketing materials, and they gave us permission. Just said, give us credit and you can use his image. And that image is put away, and I'd love to pick it up and show it to you. But he was a scientist. He was an inventor. He wanted to learn and he wanted to apply, and he did it with many farm products. He started out in Iowa and ended up at Tuskegee, and he was born into slavery. He was Carver's George. He didn't have any other name. He was the owner's name, Carver. He was Carver's possessive George, and he then made up the rest of his. George Washington Carver became his name, but he wasn't born that way. He was born into slavery as George, and he was owned by Mr. Carver. So a scientist, a developer of new information, and an example. In agriculture, we can't find many better examples. He just seemed to, he represents it, and we aspire to apply and be scientific. And this logo has several examples. So it's got the Carver alumni's colors, and it has science, and it also on the left is something we don't eat. It's a flower. So corn is our traditional crop, but that flower is coming on. The ornamental part of agriculture is big time in our area, and it's huge in its revenue. It's small in its margin, but it's huge in its revenue. So we represent that in the logo, and we hope that, besides food, that we can also see ornamental production be part of that revenue and that economy.
Thank you, Carl. I think we've been talking about, how soil has a history as well as a story, and also how it remembers. So being able to honor George Washington Carver through the center is really important. And also, Carl, the time that I visited, we had a very nice tour of the museum that's on site. If you could talk about that.
Yeah, so the alumni have been a big part of our plan, and in the IRS organizing articles, history was mentioned as one of the things we intended to focus on, and history brought alumni to the table, and their experience is represented in the museum, and the artifacts they've got are numerous. Terry Miller down at Virginia Beach is their historian, their curator, their expert on all things museum related. She deserves an awful lot of credit. I wish I had a picture of her to show you. But when I'm around that lady, I just smile and appreciate and feel some of what the students went through. So they exhibit their artifacts, and it could be an FFA jacket, it could be a trombone, it could be many other things that are part of that student experience. And so they show these things in their exhibits. One of the exhibits that they did was to honor the women in not only in the Culpeper community, but in the surrounding communities, and the teachers. And so they honored those strong women, and they named them, and they talked about what they did. And that's just one facet of interest area that Terry was smart enough to bring together. And she's also knows that traveling exhibits matter. So you go to communities with your exhibits and you have open houses and you show and you say, if you want to see more, you come to the museum at Carver. So they were put in a very strategic, important place. They were put in the library, which is right off the foyer at the beginning. Administrative offices are across that foyer. Extension will occupy those and kind of be the building manager. But the library is the second and very important spot. So that was specifically chosen and allocated big space, strategic space. They've occupied it. They've populated it with a lot of cool stuff and interesting. And when you hear them say, not even my family fully understands what I went through, we now need to have a Ken Burns style documentary, and they're working on that. So you play the music, you show the still photographs, you talk to the person in their advanced age. The youngest one is 70. So that kind of documentary thing, I can imagine it coming. And so this imagining is part of what's made Carver work. So there's some imaginers besides me, some folks with some vision or thought, but it hadn't hurt to have some of that in the beginning. And now others see examples and they go, wow, yeah, I can tell we're going to do that. So this thing is picking up speed. I say the train's pulling out of the station, and to the credit of those who recognize now what some of that early vision laid out there. So now there's plenty of people that are helping move this thing forward.
And Carl, I know we're right at time here, but where can folks find out more about the Carver Center in the resources and opportunities with it?
So their websites, you search for George Washington Carver Food Enterprise Center, George Washington Carver Ag Research Center, George Washington Carver Regional High School alumni. If you search for Carver and Culpeper, you'll soon run across websites that give you more information. They're as good as we've got. They're going to get better, and it's a way to reach people and communicate with people. So there are online resources. But I would say the best way is to put your feet on the ground and come and visit and talk with and look at what's happening to get a real feel and scope for it.
Great. Well, thank you, Carl. And it's exciting to know that extension will be there in just a couple weeks. So can come visit you and the center and see all that's going on. Really appreciate you doing a second episode with us. And again, this is For the Soil, a Conversation, and great to have you with us, Carl.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Carl. We really enjoyed hearing about Raise 300 as well as the George Washington Carver Center.
And that concludes this episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. Our host this week, Dr. Eric Bendfeldt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability, and Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Special guest, Carl Stafford with Virginia Cooperative Extension. For the Soil, a Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you have a specific question about soil health, call your local extension office or contact your local USDA Service Center or perhaps a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee.